There are stories that fade before they ever told, names that slip through the cracks of history, lost in the quiet hum of forgotten archives. These are the voices that never reach the world. Women, men, and children whose lives shaped the world, yet left no mark on the pages of history. We are here to listen, to remember, to give voice to the unheard, not just in words, but in the quiet, sacred act of uncovering what was once lost. This is not just about the past. It's about the present, about how we choose to remember and how we choose to forget. So let's begin. Let's step into the silence. Let's find the voices lost in the archives. We're talking about people whose names were never written down. Their stories were buried under the weight of history, their contributions erased by the hands that shaped the records. These are the voices that didn't make it to the margins of history books. They were mothers, builders, scientists, and leaders, but their names are just footnotes in someone else's story. It's not just about names. It's about recognition, about truth, about giving space to those whose voices were silenced, whose stories were never told. This is not just a historical inquiry. It's a moral reckoning. It's about restoring memory to those who are forgotten and learning how to listen to the voices we've lost. You might think this is just about names missing from history books, but it's about the stories that shaped our world. Stories that were silenced, dismissed, or erased. When we forget these voices, we lose more than just their names. We lose their perspectives, their struggles, and the lessons they could have taught us. You don't have to be a historian to care. Every time you use a tool, read a book, or follow a tradition, you're standing on the shoulders of someone who was once overlooked. The past is not a static thing. It's alive, and it changes when we choose to remember, to listen, and to honor what was once lost. So maybe you don't know their names, but you should know that their absence is a wound, and their legacy is a lesson waiting to be reclaimed. We begin in the 19th century, where the first women's suffrage movements were quietly shaping the future. Their voices, though often unheard, were the foundation of what would come next. Black women, in particular, were fighting for their right to vote while also fighting against the suffocating weight of racism and segregation. Their struggle was not just political, but deeply personal. The 1960s brought a new wave of activism, but even then, many voices were erased. Women of color, Indigenous women, and LGBTQ+ women were often left out of the narrative. Their contributions were not just overlooked. They were systematically erased from the historical record. These women were not just fighting for rights. They were fighting for recognition. As we move forward, we see the same pattern repeating. Women in science and politics, in the arts. Their names are often missing from the history books. Imagine you're in a library, and the books are whispering secrets. But some books are broken, and their stories are fading. These books are people, but they're not saying anything anymore. Their voices are stuck in the silence between the pages. The stories are still there, waiting. But they need you to find them, to bring them back to life, even if just for a moment. It's not just about remembering. It's about giving these voices a place to be heard, even if it's only in the quiet of a room. Every forgotten voice is a piece of history, and sometimes that history is all we have left of someone who once lived, loved, and mattered. The first step begins with a quiet room, where the weight of silence is heavy. It's not emptiness, but the echo of absence, of voices that once filled these spaces and now rest in the dust. Here, we gather what little remains, a fragmented record, a name scrawled in the margins, a note buried beneath decades of other voices. These are the fragments that must be pieced together with care. This is not just about recovery. It's about recognition. These are not mere relics. They are echoes of real people, real struggles, real contributions that deserve to be heard. The work begins with patience, with humility, with the understanding that what we find may not be enough, but it is a start, a step toward remembrance. Every step is a promise to listen, to seek, to restore what was lost, to ensure that those who were forgotten are not forgotten again. Once the call is made, the process begins with a careful scan of the archives, like peeling back layers of dust from the edges of history. Each document is handled with reverence, as if it might whisper its secrets if treated with care, and each word is considered a voice that has been waiting to be heard again. The researcher moves with patience, tracing the handwriting, noting the names, the dates, the places, all the fragments that form a life once lived and now rediscovered. This step is not just about uncovering the past, but about restoring a presence that was once silenced, ensuring that those who contributed are no longer forgotten. It is here, in the quiet act of reading and recording, that the voices lost in the archives find their way back into the light, one page at a time. The third step isn't about chasing the past. It's about finding new ways to reach it. Sometimes the forgotten voices are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right lens. This twist is the quiet revolution, rethinking how we search, how we listen, and how we let the past speak through the present. This isn't just about uncovering names. It's about giving shape to the shadows, breathing life into the echoes of those who were never heard. The clever twist is not in the act of remembering, but in the way we choose to remember. Through empathy, through technology, through a quiet refusal to let the past fade. In this step, we don't just recover the past. We reframe it, recontextualize it, and restore it to the world in a way that honors both the forgotten and the present. Beneath the dust of forgotten ledgers and brittle pages lies a quiet hum, a pulse of science that once thrived, but was never properly heard. These hands, these minds, once mapped the unseen, from the quantum to the cosmic, and their work still resonates, though their names have been quietly erased. The science wasn't lost. It was simply buried, entombed in silence, waiting for the right ears to listen and the right eyes to see. In every equation, every diagram, there is a voice, not just of the person who wrote it, but of the world they tried to understand. This is not just about recovering names. It's about restoring the very heartbeat of discovery, the quiet science that once was and still is. Imagine a library where every book is written in a language you don't speak. You can see the covers, feel the pages, but the words slip through your fingers like sand. This is what it's like to be a historian trying to recover voices that were never meant to be heard. The library isn't empty. There are books, but they're all in silence. Some are locked away, others are lost, and a few have been forgotten. The silence is heavy, a kind of mourning for the voices that once filled these halls. This is the work of historians, archivists, and storytellers. They are detectives of memory, piecing together the past from what remains. They don't just recover voices, they give them space to be heard. But the job isn't just about finding the voices. It's about making sure they aren't lost again. It's about building bridges between the past and the present, and ensuring that no one is ever erased from history. So let's not forget, every voice in the archives is a story. Every forgotten contribution is a person, a life, a legacy. And even if they were lost once, they can be found again, if we look hard enough. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You see it in the silence between the words, the way history is erased like a name from a ledger. We are here, but we are not remembered. Generations of voices were buried under the weight of foreign tongues, but some still echo in the wind, in the rhythm of the land, in the dreams of the children. This is not a tale of victory, but of endurance. A whisper in the dark, a spark in the storm, a memory that refuses to die. We are the ones who remember. We are the ones who still stand, and we are the ones who will not be forgotten. When we talk about resilience and resistance, we're not just talking about stories of survival. We're talking about the slow, violent unraveling of entire ways of life, languages, histories, identities, systematically erased by forces that saw them as inferior, unnecessary, or dangerous. Colonialism didn't just take land, it took memory. It replaced sacred sites with military barracks, burned sacred texts, and silenced voices that refused to be assimilated into a new, imposed order. Resistance was not always loud. It was in the refusal to forget, in the acts of preservation that took place in the shadows, under the cover of night, in hidden places, with the weight of history pressing down on every choice. Today, we walk through the echoes of that resistance. We see it in the way communities reclaim their languages, in the way they retrace their histories, in the way they build new futures from the ruins of the past. This is not just about survival. It's about remembering, about resisting the idea that some lives are not worth remembering. It's about the quiet power of those who refuse to be erased. You think your struggles are unique, but history is full of people who were erased, forgotten, and silenced. Their stories were buried beneath the weight of empire, and yet they endured. When you see a name on a monument or a place on a map, it's not just a label. It's a story that was stolen, rewritten, or erased. You are part of that same story, even if you don't know it. You might not be fighting for a homeland, but you are fighting for the right to exist, to be seen, to be heard. That fight is not just for them, it's for you. Colonial erasure isn't just about land. It's about identity, memory, and the right to belong. When you ignore it, you become complicit in its silence. You may not feel the weight of history, but it's shaping the world you live in. You are not separate from it. You are part of the same struggle, even if you don't realize it yet. The first wave of colonialism came like a flood, swallowing lands and languages, rewriting names and histories with the stroke of a pen. Cultures were not just displaced. They were dismembered, their traditions fractured, their voices silenced by the weight of empire. Yet, in the ruins of the old world, a new kind of resistance grew. Not in battle, but in memory, in language, in the quiet persistence of being. They did not ask to be remembered. They simply endured, carrying the weight of centuries in the silence between their words. This is not a story of victory, but of survival, of those who refused to be erased, even when the world tried to forget them. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't to fight, but to remember who you are when the world tries to erase you. You don't have to be loud to resist. Sometimes, silence is the strongest voice of all. Resilience isn't about winning. It's about holding on to a little bit of yourself, even when the world wants you to disappear. Resistance is not always a battle. Sometimes, it's just living and refusing to let the past be your future. The first step is the setup, the quiet before the storm, the silence that speaks louder than any scream. It begins with the erasure of names, of languages, of histories that refuse to be buried. They come with the weight of law and the sharpness of intent. Schools close, traditions are forbidden, and the past is rewritten to fit a new, imposed narrative. No one speaks of what was lost. Children are taught to forget the land they once called home, to see it as empty, as unclaimed. The maps are redrawn, the borders redefined, and the people are made to believe they no longer belong. But even in the darkest moments, resistance begins. It is not loud or visible, but it is real. In the way a grandmother hums an old song, in the way a boy writes his name in the dirt, in the way a village remembers its roots. The setup is not just a beginning. It is a cage, a trial, a test. It is the first step in a long and painful process, but it is also where the seeds of resistance are planted. unseen and unspoken. The mechanism begins with the silence of the land, the stories buried beneath the soil, waiting for the right hands to unearth them. Each word etched into the stone is a fragment of a language once spoken, now lost, but not forgotten by those who still carry its memory. They teach through memory, through song, through the rhythm of the heartbeat that echoes the pulse of the ancestors. This is not resistance. It is survival. The act of holding on to what was taken in the face of silence and erasure. Every act of remembering is a defiance, a refusal to let the past be erased, a promise to the future that we still exist. The clever twist is not a victory, but a survival tactic. It is the act of bending without breaking, of pretending to conform while secretly holding on to the truth. It is the language of the colonizer, spoken with the accent of the colonized. The stories rewritten to fit the margins of history, yet still containing the heartbeat of the original. This twist is not a betrayal, but a negotiation. It is the way the colonized keep their culture alive, not by shouting it, but by whispering it into the cracks of the imposed order. It is the way the past is not erased, but folded into the present, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize it as something more than a shadow. The clever twist is the final act of resistance. It is not about reclaiming what was lost, but about ensuring it is never truly lost. In the soil where our ancestors buried their dreams, the roots of resistance still grow, though unseen. The earth remembers what was taken, and in its silence, it holds the truth of our survival. DNA, passed down in whispers, carries the weight of memory. It is not just our biology, but a ledger of who we are, who we were, and who we refuse to become. Even in the silence of extinction, there is a hum, a vibration of life that refuses to be muted. It is the science of memory, the biology of belonging, the echo of those who never left. We are not just the descendants of the erased, but the embodiment of their refusal to be forgotten. The science of our survival is not in the stars, but in the soil, in the silence, in the stories that still live. Imagine a tree, its roots buried deep in the soil, but the ground is being stripped away. It's not just the earth that's taken, but the stories, the names, the memories that hold it together. The tree tries to grow taller, to reach for the light, but it's a fight against the wind, against the weight of silence, against the erasure that comes with every passing season. Sometimes the tree is cut down, but even in its fall, it leaves behind a mark, a scar in the land, a testament to what once was. And then, from the remains, new shoots emerge. Not in the way you expect, but in the quietest of places, where the soil is still warm with memory. This is not a metaphor. This is the truth of survival. To resist is not to be seen. It is to be felt in the soil, in the silence, in the breath of those who refuse to forget. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.